Hi, so welcome back to my vaguely organised craft room. This week we are going to be looking at some shorts, so grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. Okay, so continuing on my journey to improve the fit of the clothes that I make, thought I'd move on to doing some shorts. Now the fitting for shorts and trousers is essentially the same. The only thing you need to think about is how long you want the legs. So in terms of the difference between the two anyway. So I'm going to be working with this pattern. This is the Deer and Doe Chataigne shorts. I have made these shorts before, a year or two ago. I made the higher waisted version and I did make both versions of the legs and I got a lot of wear out of those shorts. But I have changed size since I made them before, and turns out, although I like the look of the high-waisted shorts, it's probably not the best option for the proportions in my body. So I'm going to be making the lower-waisted version, so this version. So whereas before I used that waistband on both sets of legs, I'm going to make just one pair for now with this belt, so the lower rise belt. And hopefully that'll do better for my proportions, so to a point where I feel more comfortable in them. I do like high-waisted stuff, it just doesn't necessarily like me when my waist is fluctuating, so they got loose very quickly and I don't really want that particularly. But because I've changed size since I made them, I am going to be toiling these, and I'm going to be toiling them without any adjustments made to the pattern at all, so we can go through the whole process of what changes I make to shorts to get them to work for me. And like I say, the process is the same for trousers as it is for shorts. The only difference between shorts and trousers is the length of the leg. So I've already got my toile fabric all cut out. I've cut out the pockets because if you look at the line drawing, the pockets actually will affect the fit because of how they're done. You want to make sure that they are proportionate. So if I'm changing anything in the leg, there's a possibility I may need to change something in the pocket. Likewise, if I'm changing the waistband, I might need to change something in the pocket. Plus it will just be a bit weird to make them without, because then I'd have this hole here. There's no point to me in changing a pattern piece just for a toile. So yes, I've cut out the pockets, I've cut out the front and back legs, and I've cut out the outside of the front and back waistband. I haven't cut out the lining piece for the waistband, front or back, because it is a toile, so I'm just doing like a shell at this stage. Once I've got the fit sorted out and see if I need to make any different adjustments this time around to the previous time, then I will do that and cut out the fabric. It's going to be in a grey linen, so it's going to be good for the summer. But I'm working with this green polycotton for now, just to sort out the fit. So this is a lighter weight fabric, but it's got a similar level of drape to the linen. The linen is not much heavier weight. I just don't have any comparable scrappy linen type fabrics around, so the polycotton will do. So yeah, so let's get to sewing. Okay, now this is a lesson in why you should always check the measurements. I had just kind of assumed that I would fit into the largest size, but I don't. So I'm going to show you this side. This is the side that's sealed. The other side would have a zip in it, and yeah, not even close. So yeah, this is why you should always check the finished garment measurements and measure yourself before you make stuff. But it's a toile, so it's not a problem. Now I knew I would need to lengthen these shorts because this is the length of the pattern, which, if they were winter shorts, would be fine. I'd wear them at this length over tights and leggings, assuming they fitted around the middle and everything. They'd be a bit looser in the leg once I've sized up everything. So yes, the chop up shorts I've got underneath are the length that I would normally wear the shorts at. So that's how far I'm going to need to lengthen them. And I'm also going to need to size up the circumference the whole way round, which is annoying. It's probably about 3 inches at the widest point that I need to increase by. And I'm going to increase the size of the pockets as well. I mean, they're there, but they're not huge, so I'm going to increase the size of the pocket bag inside. So I am going to size up the pattern pieces, at least for the circumference stuff. I'm not going to necessarily worry about the length until I'm ready for the final fabric. I'll make that decision when I've got the paper in front of me. So I'm going to size up all the pattern pieces, cut it out again in 12 fabric, and try again. But yeah, that's a bit more labour intensive sizing it up. It's fine, I'll get something that fits. I'm also going to make sure that when I cut it out next time, I put the stitch line on the front waistband in particular, because you have to line the point up and I haven't got it right. So I think having the stitch lines on is going to help with that. So yeah, it's frustrating, but there we go. Yeah. So let's go and size up some pattern pieces. Okay, so the first adjustments I'm going to do are going to be quite straightforward. I'm going to be making these on the back, the front, and both waistband pieces. So I've calculated the difference between the actual size of the piece I cut out and the size I need, and then I've divided that by 4 to get the amount that I need to add in. So for the circumference, I'm just going to take a line down the middle of the pattern piece. I'm not going to worry too much about the pocket placement. I can work that out when they're actually on my body. I will pay attention to the pleat on the front though. And then for the length, because I did need to add a few inches to the length, I'm going to be using the length and shorten line that's already on the pattern. Just going to get those 2 adjustments made. I'm just going to cut them open, spread them apart, stick the paper in. The one slight awkwardness is that the waist needs less added on than the hips. So the hips are around about here-ish. The fullest part is pretty much in line with where the pocket goes. So I do need to add more on from that point. So it's going to be a little bit of a diagonal insert for the width. It's not too big a deal. The waistband is just straightforward in the middle of the piece, spread it apart to preserve the curves, and the length, there's no big issue. So I'll get those in place. You've seen me do that sort of adjustment before, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about my purple spotty line over here, the slightly more complicated element of fitting trousers and shorts. Okay, so I've drawn a line from the top of the pocket placement. I've done the same on the lengthen and shorten line to help me line up these pieces. Now, this is the mark for the hip measurement, and this is the line for the waist measurement. I think what I'm actually going to do, rather than sloping it in to narrow it by the 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch that we've got here, I think what I'm actually going to do is leave it at that wider mark. That's going to give me a little bit more room, a little bit more ease in the leg, but that's never a bad thing. I do have quite solid thighs, so a little bit of extra ease there is not going to be a problem. So I think that's what I'm going to do. It makes the adjustments ever so slightly simpler because I don't need to cut this again and worry about where the pocket is and all that kind of thing. So yeah, so I'm going to do that. And do the same on the front. Do the same on the waistbands. And then come back to you. Okay, so I've enlarged all the pieces that I needed to enlarge. I've added 2 inches to the pocket pieces, just so that I've got a deeper pocket. So I've only added it on the curved side. I've not added it on the opening side at all because I don't need to change that. That's fine. So I should have deeper pockets, which means I can get more things in once they're on. That's always a good thing. I don't need these for the next step. The pocket flap did not need any changes made to it, so that can go to one side. The cuff that I'm not cutting out for the toile, I have added the same on the end as I've done for the leg pieces, because obviously that needs to go around the legs themselves. But I don't need the cuff for the next stage. So we're on to the waistband and the legs. So this is where my purple dots come in. Obviously when you're fitting trousers and you're fitting shorts, you want to be making sure that they fit around your circumferences, but you also want to be making sure they fit what's called the rise. I'm just going to re-stick this bit of paper down. It's come unattached. So the rise is the bit that goes between your legs, essentially. So the crotch seam. From the top of the waistband, down your belly, through your legs and up the back. So you want to measure that with your tape measure. I hold it in place roughly where I want the waistband to end. And I make sure I've sat down before I take my measurement, so that you've got enough sort of ease in that measurement. It's never going to be an exact measurement when you do it, particularly when you're doing it yourself. So it may well need tweaking come toiling. I also like to make a note of the front and the back of those measurements, because I'm not symmetrical. So I held the tape measure at my belly button and at the inseam of the trousers I was wearing at the time. So again, not going to be wonderfully accurate, but it gives me a sense of whether the front or the back is longer. In my case, the back is significantly longer for the rise. So yeah, and it's a good idea to know whether your back or your front is longer. And then I'll put in a clip of where my jeans sit on me. You'll see that there isn't always, with shopbought jeans, there's a mismatch so quite often between the front and the back. I personally quite like the coverage at the back. So I try and factor that in with trousers and shorts. The front of my jeans is sitting above my belly button, which is a little bit higher than I'd like. I like them a little bit below. And then if you see to the side view, got a bit of a slope down to the back. So the back is sitting a little bit lower than the front. So I kind of want to reverse that angle. And I like where the back is sitting, but the front needs to be a bit lower. So if I was recreating these jeans, I would make that adjustment for the shorts. I've measured from around about my belly button, which is here, and to here for the back. So the first instance of the toile, the back may still be a little bit lower, we'll see. But that's what I'm hoping to achieve. So the line's going in that direction rather than that direction, or to have it going evenly around so that they're both at the same sort of height, front and back. So to measure the rise in the pattern, this is where the purple dots come in. I've marked on my pattern pieces for the waistband and the legs the seam allowance with a purple highlighter. So I'm going to measure between seam allowances on each of these pieces. So for the waistband, that's actually quite straightforward. Just put my tape measure between those purple marks, and that's coming out at 5 inches. So that's the front waistband. I'm just making a note of that so I can refer to it later. I don't need that again for the moment. Then the same on the back waistband. So I am measuring these at the center point of the waistband. So for this waistband, that's coming out at 2 5/8. That's the back waistband. I'm not including the seam allowances in these measurements. I'm making sure I'm just measuring where the stitches are going to go, if it's a seam, and taking off the seam allowance at either end, so that I get a more close to what it's actually going to be. So for the actual crotch seam, you want to stand your tape measure on end at that seam allowance point and follow your stitch line around to the other seam allowance and take the measurement there. So for me that's 7.5, and that's the front piece. Then I'm going to do the same for the back piece. I'm probably out of shot here, but you get the idea. You're following the stitch line round with your tape measure. That's coming in at 12.5. Okay, so what I then need to do is add them together. So I'm going to add my two fronts together, and then I'll add my two backs together. So my front was 5 inches and 7.5 inches, and my back is 2 3/8 of an inch and 12.5 inches. Okay, so front's quite easy. 7 and 5 is 12, so 12.5. And the back is a little bit more complicated because of these fractions. So if you haven't been doing maths for a while in school, you want to make your denominators the same. So I'm going to multiply my half by 4 to turn it into eighths. So that then becomes 2 3/8 plus 12 4/8. That way you can add them together much more easily because you only need to add the tops. So 4 and 3 is 7, so that's 7/8, and that's 14. Okay, so my back is looking quite low. I'm looking at my measurements that I took earlier, so it's looking a lot lower than where I was hoping for the back of the waistband to be, so I may need to add something to the back rise, which is an easy enough adjustment to make. The front is looking fairly close, but let's just add those two together just to make sure. So again, we're going to deal with this half by multiplying it by 4, so that's 12 4/8, add 14 7/8. So 7 and 4 is 11, 14 add 12 is 26. We need to simplify that fraction. So that's going to have 2/8 on the end. No, it's not. It's going to have 3/8 on the end because 11 take away 8 is 3, which adds 1 onto there. So that's 27 3/8. Now, when I measured myself, I ended up with a total rise of 32.5 inches. So that's my total. So there is a bit of a gap there, a bit of a difference there of just over 5 inches. My front came in at roughly 12 inches. My back came in at roughly 21 inches. So this is where most of that difference is going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit onto the back rise piece. So in much the same way as I've already done the adjustments, I will cut across here, so I'm away from the crotch curve, and add a bit of height in there in exactly the same way as I've done for all my other adjustments. I probably won't add the full amount in. But no, I think I will add the full amount in because I can always take it out. I'm toiling it anyway. So I'm going to be adding 5 or so inches, 5 or 6 inches into the back here, which seems like an awful lot. Might just take it up a couple of inches and see where we're at, because I can always widen the waistband rather than putting it all into the back here. So I'm going to put couple of inches in here, maybe 2.5 inches in here, and then if I need to raise the back further, I'll expand the waistband when I come to do the final one, because that's an easy adjustment to make. So yeah, so I'll do that and I'll get the second twirl all cut out, and yeah. Okay, so I've essentially done a slash and spread. Well, I've exactly done a slash and spread to increase this rise. I've lifted it by 2.5 inches to the stitch line. So I'm going to even out those, the line along here and the line that meets up with the waistband, and we'll go from there. Okay, so second toile is on, and it's big enough for me to be able to pin it together at the sides. That's good. It is actually a little too big, so I was a little bit overzealous on how much I added in. I'm happy with how it's fitting around the leg. That's nice and loose, so I'm not going to worry too much about that, but I am going to take in the top of the waistband a bit, I think. But I think I might do that when I actually come to sew it up, possibly, because I think it's going to be a taking in the side seam type job. It's going to be quite straightforward, and just pinning it in here. So that we can see how the back is fitting. So yeah, a little bit to excess around the waistband, but yeah, I can taper in when I sew the side seam together. That's not too much of an issue. Let's have a look at the back. So I'll have a proper look at that when I look back at the footage. It's sitting on my knees, so that's about right. I've got a little bit of room for manoeuvre between the legs, so that's not too bad. Key test for trousers and shorts: can you sit down in them? So yeah, I'm happy with that. It's close enough of a fit. It's hanging a little bit strange around my crotch in this fabric, but that's because this fabric is quite drapey. The linen's got a bit more structure to it. So yeah, so I will mark the pattern pieces for the waistband at the edges there. But yeah, I think I will do that in the sewing out. So what I'll do is I'll notch the top of the waistband at the point that I want it to come into, and sew to that point when I'm sewing up the side seams and putting the zip in. You can see that upwards diagonal line that I was talking about for the top of the waistband, so I'm happy with that. It means that the back comes up to where I want it to come up to. It's going to cover all my dollar pants, and the seam allowance is sitting just above my belly button there. So once the facing is in, the other side of the waistband is in, it'll be a little bit lower, front and back, just 5/8 of an inch lower. So that's good. I may sew the back waistband with a slightly slimmer seam allowance if I remember, but it's close enough for where I want it to be. So yeah, so now I can press my linen and get the final fabric cut out. With that caveat there, it's a slightly heavier weight fabric, and obviously it's going to be 2 layers on the waistband, so I do want to make sure that this is right before I sew it to there. So I'll sew it up as it's supposed to be, pin it at the notch on the side seam, so the right hand side. You do all the way up, and then you insert a zip in the left. So pin it on, check that it's where I want it to be with the extra thickness, and go from there. Yay! Okay, so having looked at the footage of the back of the shorts, I've got a bit of a hungry bum going on. So I'm scooping out part of this portion of the crotch seam. So to make it wider from front to back between the legs. So this will be the new stitch line. So we're going to cut away along this line, this portion of the pattern, And I've done a similar thing but to a much smaller extent at the front, just to give a little bit more room at the front there. And if that's not quite enough taken out, then I can always take more out in the final fabric. So yeah, I mean, I've walked the stitch line to make sure that I'm still staying within my tolerance of length from where I measured the rise. So it should all be good. Okay, so the shorts are coming along nicely. I'm French seaming as much as I can. The legs are all together, the pocket flaps are on, that obviously I didn't bother to put on during the trial stage. I'm thinking I might put a button on the point there so they're not flapping around, because they're not functional pockets. But yeah, so that's the stage we're at the minute. So time to get the waistbands on, then it's zip in, side seams and cuffs. I will also be doing a final fitting to adjust that waistband as much as it needs to be for, because obviously they were too large in the toile. So yeah, I'll be taking that in once I'm at that point. Yeah, next time you see them, they should be on the body and in a wearable format, I hope. Okay, so the side seams are pinned in place just for fitting purposes. So yeah, I've got a little bit of excess waistband here. I've taken the waistband ever so slightly to the side, just sort of pinned it in place. I'm going to make a note of where that is before I stitch up the side seams. Otherwise, we're not looking too bad. I could probably get away with scooping out a little bit more on the crotch seam, but I'm not sure I'm going to bother. Yeah. So side seam, zip and cuffs, and just need to put the lining of the waistband in. So yay, nearly there. Okay, so aside from a spot of hand finishing, they're pretty much done. I need to tack the cuffs onto the outside of the legs. So yeah, they're not terrible in terms of fit. I think we're going to consider these a wearable toile. So there are a couple of adjustments I'd like to make on a future pair, one of which is the back here. I've got a little bit of excess in the waistband that I could take out. And as I say, I need to scoop out the crotch seam a little bit more, maybe an inch or so. So I've got a little bit of a peckish bottom at the moment, which is not ideal. Yeah, so I'm just going to get that hand finishing done, and then we'll see what they look like when they're all finished. Okay, so all the hand finishing is done. They're on, they're comfortable, I can sit in them, I can move around in them. There are some adjustments that I still want to make to the fit though. So I'm considering these like an accidental wearable toile. I do have some other fabric that I'm thinking about for them, so yeah, like that I've already got in stash. I'll definitely be making more of them. The ones I made before, I got an awful lot of wear out of, so I know I'll get the wear out of it, so I don't mind making multiple versions in different fabrics. So changes to be made. I need to adjust the waistband a bit. I did have to take quite a bit off the waistband already to make it fit, so I've obviously sized it up too much for where the shorts are going to sit on my body, so I can adjust that. What I'll do is I'll take a little bit out of the centre back seam in the waistband and the top of the shorts, and I also want to extend the curve of the crotch seam between the legs. So I'm thinking I'll probably do is actually slash and spread a little bit on that seam. The error I made was getting the seam to match my measurement. What I should have done is get it to match my measurement plus a little bit of ease. It's not uncomfortable, I have got room to move, and it's comfortable to sit down, so it's fine. It's just the look of it isn't quite where I wanted it to be. So I'll drop that down a little bit and extend the curve out the front by slashing and spreading, and that should solve that issue. The other errors that I made: French seaming the pockets. Now don't get me wrong, French seaming the pockets definitely a good idea, it gives a really nice finish. It's just that I French seamed one of them on the outside of the pocket where I was supposed to, and one on the inside. That's mostly because I hadn't marked the inside and outside of the pocket pieces, and this fabric is the same on both sides, so yeah. Is it irritating? Mildly. Enough to want to undo it and redo it? Not in the slightest. The only thing I might do to this particular pair of shorts at some point is open up that back seam and take that in there, or maybe put some elastic in the back to cinch it in a bit, depending on what my weight does, because my weight fluctuates a little bit. But yeah, the next bit there, I'll make that adjustment, and I'll smooth out the centre seam on the body bit of the shorts as well. It's a little bit pointy at the moment, but only mildly so. So overall, I'm really happy. They're comfy to wear. A few adjustments to make to the pattern pieces before I make the next versions, but there will be more in multiple different fabrics because I like these. I may try and do the scalloped hem again at some point. I tried that on the last time around. I did one pair with the cuffs and one pair with the scallop. Scallop's tricky, so yes, I may try that again. But yeah, definitely like these shorts in the longer length. So yeah, lots of adjustments I've had to make for sizing and length and all that kind of thing, and a few more tweaks, but we're almost there. We're almost there. So I will obviously keep you updated when I get around to making another pair of these. It's not going to be next week, but at some point there will be another version of these. And in the meantime, you might enjoy this video here.